times have been changed. In Charlotte, North Carolina, in April of 1983, an armored truck drove up to a local bank to make its daily deposit. The courier was delivering the day's receipts from an area mall.
Morning, ma'am.
Hi, Jack. Come on in.
More buzzes.
Big deposit today, huh?
Absolutely. Thank you very
All right,
much.
there you
Thank
go.
very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
See
day.
you tomorrow.
Most banks in the U.S. use automatic counters calibrated to reject any bills that are an odd size or paper thickness. The machine rejected one of the notes. A worn-looking $20 bill. Suspecting it may be counterfeit, the clerk contacted the nearest office of the Secret Service.
Hi, I would like to report a counterfeit.
Although it is known for providing protection to the president, the Secret Service was originally founded to investigate counterfeit currency. An agent was dispatched to the bank to try and determine where the bill came from. The Secret Service canvassed the mall to determine if any of the retailers could identify the passer. Agents interviewed employees throughout the mall where the bill had been passed.
Need to talk to you about that. Try to pass this.
The cashiers couldn't recall who had passed the fake bill. Special Agent Dennis Foose worked the case.
In many cases, counterfeit bills will be received by a merchant, not detected as counterfeit, go into the till, and might be given back to the next customer in the form of change. So it's not uncommon for someone to innocently pick up a counterfeit bill and then even pass it on to another merchant.
The Secret Service sent the counterfeit $20 note to their forensics lab in Washington, D.C. Lorelei Pagano is a counterfeit specialist. It is her job to analyze the counterfeit notes.
They're examined for information about the paper, the printing process, the inks, any simulation of security features, any investigative information that we can give back to the field to help them stop the counterfeiting.
The examiner focused her attention on the style of printing. The counterfeit bill was flat and slick. The printing process of the U.S. Mint creates raised areas on the bill where the ink is applied. The U.S. Treasury has a series of safeguards to discourage counterfeiting. In the 1980s, the paper they printed on was embedded with red and blue fibers. This counterfeiter had printed red and blue lines on the bills to simulate the look of the paper. Comparing the bill to previously passed notes, the technician noticed these defects were similar to others she had seen.
We associate notes together by determining if there's significant individuality of two portions of a note that allows us to define that they're coming from the same counterfeiting operation. And in that sense, we then create families of counterfeits.
This family of counterfeit bills began appearing in the early 1980s and were cataloged under Circular 7215. This was the 7,215th run of counterfeit bills in U.S. history. Agents telexed a notice to branch offices around the country. Since 1980, the Secret Service had recovered more than 1,000 variations of Circular 7215.
I'll be $1.95 for you.
The counterfeit bills had been passed for the most part in shopping malls. Because of this, they dubbed their suspect the mall passer. The agents had very little information about their suspect. They didn't know if he was working alone or if he was part of a counterfeit ring. All they knew for certain was that his fake $20 bills had defrauded the U.S. out of thousands of dollars.
Thank you. You too.
Greg Mertz, a former homicide detective, had been with the Secret Service only a year and a half when he began investigating the case.
The counterfeit money he produced was a fairly good quality note. I mean, it passed. If that's your standard or your barometer as to how good a counterfeit bill is, can it pass on the general public? The majority of the bills did pass.
For years, the Secret Service struggled to find a lead. Thousands of dollars in counterfeit 20s with the same telltale flaws had turned up in malls all across the country. Secret Service agent Jane Vizeris worked the case.
A particular area would be hit by this note, and you would see that there was a 20 passed in a bookstore, and then a 20 passed in a stationery store, and then maybe 20 passed, you know, in a small area, but not large numbers. And it was over a long span of time, and it was over a large geographic area of this country. And that was peculiar.
To the agents, the passer's odd behavior made it seem as if his counterfeiting was hiding something else. Then they got a break.
$3.
A clerk in Burnside, Minnesota, took in a $20 bill that didn't feel right to her. She suspected it was fake. The clerk observed the passer as he got into his car and drove away. She later gave the Secret Service their first description of the suspect. She also described his car as a white Ford, but was unable to read the license plate. The Secret Service distributed a sketch based on the clerk's description to shopping malls all across America.
We established that he had visited every state east of the Mississippi River and many states west of the Mississippi River, and would hit malls, shopping malls, generally during weekends or busy periods. Holiday weekends were a favorite.
The mall passer always made small purchases. He would buy a pair of socks, a book, or a single greeting card.
Out of 20?
He passed his bills 120 at a time, collecting his change and moving on. He never went for the big score. He was patient and methodical. The Secret Service was puzzled by the mall passer's mobility. He would drop a bill in Florida, and the very same day, a dozen fake 20s would appear 500 miles away. They weren't certain whether his fake bills were in circulation or whether he was, in fact, passing them. If he was, they thought he might be someone who traveled for a living.
We started with a notion that because of the distances that the passes occurred from each other, that one possibility might be that the notes were being passed by a pilot.
One of the mall passer's counterfeit bills turned up at a parking lot near an airport in Washington, D.C.
Good night.
Thank you.
The Secret Service got a description of the passer from the parking lot attendant. A similar note had been passed in that lot exactly 1 year before. The next day, agents showed a composite drawing of their suspect to a ground crew who identified him as a pilot. Airline officials provided a picture.
I laid the composite next to the photograph of their pilot and got a little excited because it appeared that the composite drawing could have been traced from that very picture.
The Secret Service followed the pilot to see if he was passing fake bills. They surveilled him in and out of airports.
Hey there, how are you?
When they saw him spending money, they would retrieve the bill to see if it was counterfeit.
Secret Service agents, I'd like to take a look at the bill that the last customer just used, please.
They also checked his flight record.
Thank you.
His assignments had not taken him near any of the counterfeit passes. They concluded he could not be the mall passer. The investigators hit a dead end.
When you look at the total dollar amount that this individual was passing, it was insignificant compared to the total amount of counterfeit passed in the country or the world. However, this one individual was beating the Secret Service year after year for 3 years straight.
Each time a bill was passed, the counterfeit note was sent to the lab in Washington. Technicians at the lab tested the bills for fingerprints. The money had been crumpled up before it was passed. The best they could do was raise a partial print. It was not clear enough to make a match. Investigators observed that the mall passer often traveled Interstate 95 up and down the eastern United States. He would take smaller routes, but he always returned to 95. Agents began to suspect that he made his home in the Washington, D.C. area. If so, he was right under their noses. In May of 1983, as the Memorial Day holiday approached, they anticipated his passing would intensify.
We went out and hit various malls showing our composite and alerting them to the possibility that the mall passer might be hitting during that time frame. We not only did that in Washington, D.C., but we set up sort of a band that would cover these common routes that we knew that he took, which extended across to Tennessee.
The Secret Service contacted thousands of stores up and down the East Coast. A report came in from the Knoxville office that a phony bill had been passed at a shop in Kingsport, Tennessee. The Secret Service confirmed it came from the mall passer.
Sure.
If the predictions of his travel patterns held true, Knoxville would be next. Agents at the local field office were dispatched to cover the newly opened mall.
Pete Allison, Secret Service.
They went to every shop, showing clerks a photograph of the sketch they had made of the mall passer.
Tell me if you've seen this gentleman. I know that guy.
Agent Pete Allison remembers the manager of one of the shops recognized the picture.
The clerk felt like he would know this person because he had been shown this photograph before in Memphis. The person victimized him at his store in Memphis. And he told me that he would, if this person walked in the store, he would recognize him immediately.
Incredibly, a few minutes after the agent left, the mall passer entered the shop. Agents finally got the break they had been waiting for when the clerk reported seeing the passer.
Suspect spotted outside mall. Respond immediately. Over.
All right. Allison, I'm on the way.
The clerk told agents he had seen the suspect enter a bookstore nearby. A security officer checked out the bookstore, but the mall passer was not there. Then they spotted him, coming out of a shoe store.
Stay here.
Aware he was being followed, he began running toward a store that was under construction. Two police officers pulled up outside the unfinished area where the mall passer had disappeared. The suspect tried to bluff his way past the officers by telling them that the police had already cleared him to leave. The officers didn't believe him.
That's it. Hold on. Don't worry. He's not going anywhere. I need to step up to the car real quick.
They searched him and found a gun in his